You already know what glass is, of course you do. You've touched it 1,000 times. The window beside your desk, the screen you're holding right now, the drinking glass you picked up this morning without a second thought. It's solid, obviously. You don't need a physics degree to know that. You can tap it with your knuckle and hear it. You can press your finger against it and feel it push back. Solid. Case closed. Except, here's the thing that nobody tells you in school. Glass, the same material in your window, your phone screen, your kitchen cabinet, does not have the internal molecular structure of a solid. Not even close. Its atoms are arranged with the same disorder as a liquid, the same chaotic, random, non-repeating tangle you'd find in water, or in oil, or in anything that pours. And yet, it doesn't pour. It doesn't flow. It just sits there, rigid, cold, holding the shape it's had for years. So here's the question you can't answer yet. If the molecular structure of glass looks like a liquid, and I mean that literally, measurably, at the atomic level, then what exactly is the thing you've been pressing your fingers against your entire life? What are you actually touching right now? Because the answer isn't what you think, and once you understand it, you will never look at a transparent surface the same way again. Not the window, not the screen, not the glass of water sitting 3 feet from you. Every single one of them is hiding something that classical physics spent over a century trying to name and still argues about today. Okay, so your first instinct is probably this. Glass is solid because it's hard, because it's rigid, because when you press against it, it doesn't give. That's what solid means, right? Resistance, stiffness, the thing that doesn't move when you push it. And honestly, that's a completely reasonable answer. It's the answer most people give. It's the answer that feels obviously correct the moment you say it out loud. But here's the problem. Hardness is not a definition of the solid state. It never was. Diamond is one of the hardest materials on Earth, and it is a true crystalline solid, yes. But rubber is soft, and it's also a solid. Aerogel is so light it barely exists, and it's a solid too. Hardness tells you about a material's resistance to scratching. It tells you nothing, absolutely nothing, about the internal arrangement of its atoms. And it is the internal arrangement of atoms that defines what phase of matter something actually is. When physicists look at a true crystalline solid, iron, table salt, quartz, they find the same thing every time. A repeating lattice, atoms locked into a precise, long-range, geometrically perfect pattern that extends across the entire material. Every atom knows where it is. Every atom has a fixed address. That ordered structure is what makes something a solid in the physical sense. Glass has none of that. Zero. When you image glass at the atomic scale, you find disorder, randomness. Atoms connected to each other, yes, but with no repeating pattern, no long-range order, no crystalline lattice of any kind. It looks, structurally, like a photograph of a liquid taken at a random moment. So hardness isn't your answer. Try again. Your second instinct, and this one is much more convincing, is probably the cathedral window argument. You've maybe heard this one before. The old stained glass windows in medieval European cathedrals are measurably thicker at the bottom than at the top. You can go verify this yourself. The glass is not uniform. And the explanation that spread through classrooms, documentaries, and science books for decades was elegant. Glass is actually a supercooled liquid, flowing imperceptibly slowly under gravity, and over hundreds of years it has sagged just a little toward the bottom of the frame. It sounds perfect. It explains the data. It fits the narrative. Glass is a liquid in disguise, and the cathedrals are the proof. Except it's wrong. Completely, embarrassingly, measurably wrong. Medieval glassmakers did not have the technology to produce glass of uniform thickness. They used a process called crown glass manufacturing. Molten glass spun into a disc, then cut into panes, and the resulting pieces were inherently uneven. When glaziers installed those panes, they did what any sensible craftsman would do. They put the thicker, heavier edge at the bottom for stability. The thickness variation you see in cathedral windows is a manufacturing artifact and an installation choice. It is not flow. It is not movement. It is not evidence of anything liquid. And here's the number that closes the argument permanently. At room temperature, 20 degrees Celsius, the viscosity of glass is approximately 10 to the power of 40 Pascal seconds. 001, that means glass, at room temperature, is roughly 10 to the power of 43 times more viscous than water. To put that in terms your brain can actually process, if you waited for a pane of glass to flow just 1 single millimeter under gravity at room temperature, you would need to wait longer than the current age of the universe. Not a few billion years, 8 billion years, by an almost incomprehensible margin. Glass does not flow. Not in a century, not in 10 centuries, not in any time frame that has any connection to human experience, or to the universe's experience. So you're stuck. It's not solid by crystalline definition, it doesn't flow like a liquid, it's harder than most metals but structurally disordered like water.
Every category you have in your head, solid, liquid, the things you learned in school, has just been pulled out from under you. You are holding something in your hand right now, something you've touched 10,000 times, and you cannot tell me what phase of matter it actually is. Neither could physicists, for a very long time. But the answer exists, and it's stranger than either of the explanations you just tried. Here's what glass actually is. Glass is an amorphous solid. That's the answer. 2 words that sound simple, but contain one of the most genuinely strange ideas in all of material science. Amorphous means without form, without the long-range atomic order that defines a crystalline solid. And solid means it has a rigidity, a mechanical resistance that a true liquid does not. Glass is both of those things simultaneously. It is rigid like a solid and disordered like a liquid, and it is neither one in the classical sense.
It exists in a category that nature invented and that physics has been arguing about ever since. Think about what that means for the window you look through every morning. That glass is not a wall. It's not a barrier in the way a brick or a steel beam is a barrier. It is a snapshot, a frozen moment. At some point in the past, that material was molten, genuinely liquid, flowing, shapeless, and then it was cooled. But it was cooled fast enough that its atoms never had time to find their preferred positions, never had time to lock into a crystalline lattice. They just stopped, mid-chaos. The disorder of the liquid state got trapped inside a rigid structure, and what you have now is a material that is mechanically solid, but atomically arrested. A liquid that forgot to finish becoming something else. You are looking through frozen disorder every single day. And the mechanism behind this, the reason it happens, the reason some materials do this and others don't, starts with something invisible. Something happening right now inside every surface you can see through, at a scale so small it makes the width of a human hair look like the distance between cities. Let's go inside the glass. Not metaphorically, actually inside, at the scale where atoms live. The most common glass you encounter every day, your window, your phone screen, your drinking glass, is made primarily from silicon dioxide, silica. Each silicon atom bonds to 4 oxygen atoms, and each of those oxygen atoms bridges to another silicon. In a crystalline material like quartz, which is also made of silicon dioxide, those connections repeat, over and over, in a perfect geometric lattice, extending across the entire structure like a 3-dimensional tiled floor that never misses a step. Every atom is exactly where the pattern says it should be. In glass, the same atoms are present, the same silicon, the same oxygen, the same chemical bonds, but the pattern never forms. Instead of a tiled floor, you get a tangled web, a continuous random network where the bond angles vary slightly from connection to connection, where no 2 local environments are exactly the same, where the structure extends in all directions with no repeating unit, no blueprint, no geometric memory. It is chemically ordered at the local scale. Each silicon still bonds to 4 oxygens, but structurally chaotic at every larger scale above that. That distinction, local order, global disorder, is everything. And it explains something you've probably never thought to question. Why can you see through glass? Why does light pass through it when light doesn't pass through wood or metal or your hand? The answer lives in that disordered atomic network. In a metal, electrons move freely through the material. They intercept photons, particles of light, almost immediately, absorbing them or reflecting them back. That's why metals are opaque. That's why your aluminum window frame blocks light, and the glass panel beside it doesn't. In glass, the electrons are locked into those silicon-oxygen bonds. They are not free. And the energy of visible light photons, the specific frequency range your eyes use, is not enough to knock those electrons loose or excite them into a higher energy state. So the photons don't get absorbed. They don't get reflected by the bulk material. They travel straight through the disordered network, passing between the atoms, interacting with the electromagnetic field of the structure, but not surrendering their energy to it. You can see through glass because visible light photons are the wrong size key for the lock that silicon-oxygen bonds create. That's quantum mechanics deciding what you can and cannot see, not engineering, not design.
Quantum mechanics, operating at the scale of individual electron energy levels, determining that your window is transparent and your wall is not. Now here's where it gets even stranger. Glass doesn't have a melting point, not a real one. Not the way ice has a melting point, a precise temperature where the crystalline structure collapses and the liquid phase begins. Glass has what physicists call a glass transition temperature, written as Tg. For standard window glass, that's somewhere around 550 degrees Celsius. But Tg is not a phase transition in the classical sense. It's a range, a gradual zone where the viscosity of the material drops enough that atoms begin to have meaningful mobility, where the frozen disorder starts to loosen, where the material shifts from behaving like a rigid solid to behaving like an extremely viscous liquid. Below Tg, the atoms are trapped. They cannot rearrange.
The disorder is locked in permanently, or at least for longer than the universe has existed, as you already know. Above Tg, they can move, slowly at first, then faster. This is why glass blowers can shape molten glass with breath and gravity and iron rods. They're working in the temperature range where the viscosity has dropped just enough for the material to flow and be molded, but not so much that it collapses. They are sculpting frozen disorder before it refreezes. Every glass object you've ever seen was shaped in that narrow window between chaos and rigidity. And the force holding all of it together, the force that keeps the silicon-oxygen network locked in place, that makes glass rigid at room temperature despite its atomic disorder, that determines the exact temperature at which it softens, is electromagnetic, the same fundamental force that governs every chemical bond in the universe. The same force responsible for the structural integrity of every material you have ever touched, electromagnetism, expressed through quantum mechanical bonding between specific atoms, produces a material with no crystalline order that nonetheless holds its shape for timescales longer than cosmological history. The glass in your hand is an electromagnetic structure frozen by quantum mechanics into a state that classical physics has no clean word for. That is what you have been touching your entire life. Here's the part that should make you stop for a moment. The same process that produces glass, atoms cooling too fast to find crystalline order, disorder frozen into rigidity by electromagnetic bonds, is not unique to silicon dioxide. It happens in biological systems too. It happens in you. The lens of your eye, the crystalline proteins packed inside it, exist in a state that shares deep structural properties with amorphous materials. They are not crystalline. They are densely packed, partially disordered, held in a specific configuration by the same electromagnetic forces that hold your window together. And when that configuration breaks down, when those proteins begin to aggregate and lose their precise arrangement, you get cataracts. The lens clouds over. It stops transmitting light the same way glass stops transmitting light when its surface is scratched or its internal structure is disrupted. You are not looking through glass. You are looking through one amorphous structure with another amorphous structure. Your eye and your window are at the deepest physical level solving the same problem in the same way. And this is the thing that gets to me, genuinely, every time I think about it. You have walked past windows your entire life. You have pressed your fingers against phone screens and held drinking glasses and looked through car windshields in the rain. And in every single one of those moments, you were in contact with one of the most physically ambiguous materials in the universe,
A material that sits outside the clean categories of the textbook. A material that physicists still debate how to classify. A material that is simultaneously rigid and disordered, solid and not solid, ancient in its use and still not fully understood. And it was completely invisible to you, not because you weren't smart enough to see it, but because nothing ever pointed at it and said, "Look closer." He wasn't talking about glass specifically. He was talking about the posture you need to actually see the world, the refusal to accept that familiar things are understood things. Because the moment you stop questioning the object in your hand, you stop seeing it entirely. You start seeing a category, a label, a word.
And the physics disappears. Look at the glass near you right now, the window, the screen, whatever transparent surface is within reach. You are looking at frozen chaos. You are looking at atoms that tried to become a crystal and didn't make it in time, locked into a disordered network by electromagnetic forces operating at the quantum scale. Transparent because visible light is the wrong key for the locks those silicon-oxygen bonds create. Rigid for timescales longer than the age of the universe. And still, after all of that, not fully classified by the science that studies it. It was always this strange. You just didn't know where to look. If this cracked something open for you, if you're now staring at your phone screen or your window with slightly different eyes, there's an entire world of objects just like this one. Objects hiding physics so counterintuitive that understanding them changes the way you move through ordinary space. That's what this channel is built for.
The next one is already waiting.